Okay, we're going to roll right into registrations. We have it set up as a two-part process. First, you go online and you fill out the youth registration form and arrange for your payment. Next, you fill out your youth forms. We have 3 different youth forms. One is a participant covenant that's filled out by the youth. One is a parent permission form that's filled out by the parent. This gives the youth permission from the parent to be at GA, and also it designates whoever their sponsor is going to be. If their sponsor is actually going to be their parent, then their parent fills out their own name as the sponsor on the parent permission form. Lastly is the sponsor responsibilities agreement. This is a form that we touched on earlier. Jessica mentioned it. It designates what all the responsibilities and expectations are of the sponsor. And it's a form that's filled out by all 3 parties, the youth, their sponsor, and their parent. And we do that because we do expect all 3 of them to have a conversation at some point to talk about any type of medical issues that their youth may have that their sponsor would need to be aware of, to talk about what is expected, what kind of supervision do the parents expect the sponsor to provide, and also to exchange contact information. You would be surprised how many people just leave it up to the DRE. They say, we trust our religious educator or our youth coordinator to be handling whatever situation, so we don't need to know where they're staying or who is going to be sponsoring them. So we certainly hope that people will exchange contact information so that so that a parent knows how to reach their sponsor and vice versa. These 3 forms can be a little tricky to put together for every single youth who's attending. How do you guys manage that?
Well, so I'll share 2 things. One thing that does work, and then also sometimes there's just nothing to do. So one of the things that I always do is I actually back up whatever the deadline is that the GAYouth office has set about when the forms have to be in. I always tell my youth that they're due at least a week ahead of that. Yeah. Like, I tell my youth and parents, and they'll be like, but it's different on the website. I say, yes, and I have pieces I need to do. So I need you to get your stuff done by this date, which is a week ahead of when everything has to 100% be done. So that way, if there's any little bits and pieces, if there's anything I need to do, I have a week to do my part. And in an ideal world, if everything gets done, then I don't really have much to do other than just confirm that it's done. And I always ask them to download a copy on the last screen of the registration. And on the forms, you can download a copy or print a copy. So I always ask them to download it and email it to me when they're done, so that way I know that that's been done. Which is really helpful. And so that way it gives me a week to also track down, like, hey, I haven't heard from you. Did you get this finished? Blah, blah, blah. So that's one tip I have. I will also say that the registration isn't bad. Registration is pretty easy. There are some questions on the registration that your youth and parents may not know the answer to. Like, when was your congregation founded? And when was the last time your congregation was represented at GA? And the size of your congregation. So I always create this like super dense email, and I warn everybody in the first sentence of the email of like, there is a massive amount of information in this. You need to read it really carefully. And I will outline and bullet point out, okay, on the first page of the registration, these are the questions you're going to have to answer. And sometimes it's like, okay, you're going to put in your demographic information, easy. The next page, you're going to need to know this about our congregation. It has this many people. We last attended GA in this year. We were founded at this time, those kinds of questions. And I will literally screen by screen kind of walk them through it in an email. And I found that cuts down on a lot of the confusion around the registration form. And once youth have done it once, it does make it easier. And maybe actually, I am totally speaking out of turn because that's the scholarship application, not the registration form. But on the scholarship application, it's applicable too. To give them all that kind of.
It sounds, Jessica, like you have your youth and sponsors submit their own, fill out and submit their own registrations.
I do, just because I don't have all of the details, and especially when we have people applying for scholarship information, I don't feel comfortable asking families for all of the information that I would need to fill it out for them, which includes financial information about their family and stuff like that. So I try to just walk them through the process as much as I can. And getting those forms filled out is usually pretty easy. It's the e-sign forms that you were referring to that are often can cause issues.
Yeah.
Not always.
The 3 youth forms that we have people fill out can either be downloaded and printed from a PDF that's available online, or can be filled out online using an electronic signature system called Sign Now. And the electronic system has some quirks to it, and it's we've had a lot of requests for this type of system and over the years, and some people who have that technological capability and have they all have email addresses that they're checking all the time, can whip through the process pretty easily, and other people don't. So does anybody put in registrations where you put in all the registrations for everyone who's going on the trip?
I don't. I haven't yet anyway.
I've done it for batches of folks that might need a little extra help getting that in. If I know somebody's parent isn't going to be able to do it, I'll get the information ahead of time and just get that one, at least get that first piece in before all of the forms, the additional forms. And then I wanted to piggyback on what Jessica said about the forms. One of the things I always make sure I do is have a hard copy of all the forms with me on my person when I leave, when I travel, with all the signatures and everything, in addition to things like insurance information and such. So it's like, if you will, it's like our little football, it's all that critical, having those forms with. That way, when you get the check-in, if something's missing or something didn't get ticked off properly, you've got hard copies.
Yes, don't send me originals unless you've made copies, please.
Yes. I go all of that. More than once I've had that happen, and I'm always so thankful that I have that hard copy.
Yeah. Now, I have heard from some people who try to do it all on their own, where the trip organizer, the youth coordinator, will put in everybody's registrations because they have concerns about payment, that the congregation is going to be making the payment for all of them. But I just want to reiterate that you don't have to provide payment at the time of filling out your registration form. You can make arrangements you can have people make arrangements to pay later, or tell them, we'll be mailing in a check. It just gives you about a week or 10 days to, get back in contact with the General Assembly office to arrange payment for however many registrations, whichever registrations you're paying for.
And if you're applying for scholarships, you don't send in payment right away anyways.
Actually,
or this is that changed?
if you're applying for a scholarship, we ask you not to register at all, because it's much easier for the UUA to put in your registration and pay it through our internal billing system than it is for us to refund you for a registration you've already put in and then put in another registration for you. So
yeah, that's why I was so confused, because most of our people are always applying for scholarships, and so that's what I think of as registration, because we don't half the time don't ever even use the regular registration.
Yeah. If you're awarded a scholarship, then you'll be notified through an email with a separate link where you can go in and register, and it'll bill back to the UUA. You don't have to submit any payment at all. Oh yes, we do encourage people to do that.
One thing I do with registration and the sponsor forms and I don't know if Deborah appreciates this, but I certainly do. I will email Deborah and say, these are the youth I have going. Who have you received X from? Who have you received Y from? Which tells me who I need to nag again.
Yeah, I've done
Yeah.
the same thing.
I think I've done that too.
That's perfectly fine, and it's great to have your help too in tracking down people who haven't submitted their forms yet.
And
Yeah,
one thing I'd like to add on to that piece is one of the challenges both myself as the trip organizer and a number of my youth had last year with the electronic system for the sponsor agreements is that I had several youth who said truthfully that they had filled out their portion of it, but either the parent or the sponsor had not done their portion. And I believe that system was set up, things had to go in a particular order. So they could tell me with a straight face, yes, I did what I was supposed to do, but that didn't mean that the rest of the process had been followed through to completion.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up, Scott. The system works in a cascading process where the system sends an email to the youth email address. It provides them a link to go in and fill out their portion of the form and e-sign it. Then once that's completed, it sends an email to the parent, and then after that to the sponsor. Might be sponsor and then parent. I'll double check that. But it's a cascading system. So if one person early in the system or early in the cascade has done their part, but somebody in the middle hasn't, then the whole form is held up. It's not complete yet. So yeah, that's something to keep in mind. And like you said, if you have any questions at all or you're having any challenges, you can always email me. I'm at, again, youth@uua.org.
And one thing I'll say that we ran into certainly last year, and I think also the year before, was that sometimes like the youth would start the form and then the parent might not find the email or get it or whatever. So then they have the youth do it again because it must not have worked. And then the email might have been delayed. So then the parent ends up with multiple emails from the document website telling them to sign. But then if they sign the wrong one, it's like out of order, and then the sponsor gets multiple ones. So if that happens, email Deborah. And we found that sometimes there's just a delay. And so don't immediately try to redo it, because having multiple copies in the system makes it so much harder than just waiting and like giving it 24 hours. And then if the email doesn't show up, maybe email Deborah and be like, hey, part 1 was done by youth at such and such a time. They put in my parent email or sponsor email, whichever one it is, but we never got our link. Can you send us the link? And like that helps. And sometimes as the trip organizer, there's just always, even if most of the group has done it flawlessly, there might just be a family that just can't quite figure it all out and is just having trouble. And my go-to is always reach out to Deborah, and she just helps us fix it, and it makes everything better.
Yes, I know we're making this process sound very daunting, but the majority of people don't have much of a problem with it. And we're also going to be providing a downloadable PDF this year of just some tips and tricks about the system, how it works, and some troubleshooting. So we should be able to make that information a little bit more available to people so they can figure it out easier.
One thing that we did registration weekend was we had a laptop for a youth group, and we all registered together. Just doing a scholarship application, getting it in together, or registration, or wherever you're at, and having to be a parent there. It can just be after the service. You could bring in lunch and make a celebration out of it. But that's a really good way, especially because sometimes it's accessibility to, high-speed internet or whatever that can hold folks up. So, and then you have your native digital speakers there with the parents and the sponsors, they can help them get through that piece as well.
That's a great idea. Yeah, have everybody come together for one big meeting and pass the laptop around.
And we
and
don't have to do digital forms, right?
That's true. Yes. You can also download the PDF and print it out, as many copies as you need, and then put everybody in a big room, hold a mandatory meeting of all the youth, parents, and sponsors, and then you all just go through the forms together and fill them out together step by step. Yeah. And then you can I have a number of religious educators who will collect those forms and then send them in one big package to me.
That's what I've done in the past. I've just collected them and put them in one big package.
Yeah.
Can we also scan?
You can scan. Please do not email me scanned copies, because the UUA email system is not secure enough to safeguard sensitive personal information that you may feel is too sensitive to, put through out into the ethers.
Then how do we get it to you?
Well, we do have a separate secure email system that we use. So you just shoot me an email, again, at youth@uua.org, ask me to hook you up with that system. And then I can go into the system, send you an email, and then you can get me electronic copies that way.
I think that's what I did last time. I seem to remember doing that, going through that process with you.
Yeah.
It wasn't that difficult.
No, it's not that difficult. And no particular way of doing this is preferable for us. So, you decide, you figure out what's going to be the easiest for you, and what's going to be the easiest for your youth, parents, and sponsors to complete, in the quickest way possible. Does anybody have any other tips or information they want to share about either sponsors or registration?
I just want to piggyback on something that Jessica said earlier about the communication piece. For me, getting up to that March 1st date, it's really important to have a lot of emails, texts, Facebook group, whatever communications, hitting on multiple different spaces, saying, even if it's just a little, blip here, check your email. The big wordy email is there, and make sure, because that seems to be the biggest chunk that it's a communication breakdown that happens between the parents and the youth and the sponsors, and you got to make sure that information keeps flowing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and once whenever the date is that they send out the scholarship award letters, whoever the first one is that gets it, because I always have my youth, I'm like, as soon as you get an email, forward it to me so I know what happened. As soon as I get one, I will email the entire group. Okay, the letters are going out today. You should either already have it or you'll get it within the next few hours. As soon as it shows up, forward it to me. This is the email it's coming from. And a lot of times I've found youth who didn't see it, but then I'm like, go search your email with this name, and then it'll pop up because it was hiding under, some weird subfolder.
Or it ended up in their spam filter or something like that. Yeah.
So, yeah.
The last thing I'd like to add is that a lot of congregations have their own set of forms that they expect people to fill out for their congregation in order to be compliant with their Safer Congregations process, or their own travel, or to cover their travel to and from GA. Be sure that parents and sponsors know that that's an additional process. That's the process for the congregation. And then for GA, we have our set of forms that's an additional part. We cannot accept your congregation's forms as a substitute for ours. It's in addition.
There's one more digital form that needs to be filled out if a youth is a delegate or if a sponsor is a delegate. And that's the addition to all this. That's another system.
Yes. Being a delegate is an additional registration process above and beyond getting your GA registration. Thank you for sharing that, Mary.
Yeah, and I guess really quick, I'll just lift up, because I've had this question come up a number of times with youth who wanted to be delegates. And they think they have to apply for it through the UUA or something like that, but it's fully congregational. And so generally, depending on the system of your congregation, that might go through the minister or it might go through the board. But that's who you need to talk to if your youth wants to be a delegate, and then they, or sometimes the administrator, will have the credentials to be able to log in and assign those delegate credentials to whoever it is that the church has decided will be representing them at GA. So just to know that that's on your church side to make that determination.
Thank you. And some churches have restrictions that their delegate must be a member. And if they don't allow youth members, that's a great opportunity for you to introduce the idea to your congregation that they can figure out a way to have youth be members too.
We actually
fully
changed,
participative.
we actually changed our membership age to allow youth to be delegates for General Assembly. So now it was 18, now it's 16. And that shift happened when we had a youth who wanted to do that. So that's a positive that came out of it.
Wonderful. Well, we've shared a ton of great information here about the registration process and the forms process. And I know it's going to make it so much easier for other people who haven't been through it before to get through it. So thank you very much.